Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube or on Rumble. I have a special guest with me today. Jake is coming from the United States, and his name is already in the live chat. People like you, people like your thoughts, people like your observations about the Palestinian case, and many people are happy to see you back on this online platform. So thank you so much, Jake, for coming again. You are a chief investigator at the Blackstone Intel.
Yes, thank you so much for having me back. I love talking with a like-minded, rational, intelligent person who can see the world without the heavy bias from one end or the other. It's rare.
You know, Jake, I always say that this is also a learning process for me. And when I started covering, for example, 7 years ago or 8 years ago on YouTube, my style and my content was completely different. And when I used to watch people who are, let's say, thinking more outside the box or being more critical on different things, I was like, no, these people are so suspicious of everything, you know? And then I realized through time that they were right. And I have to be suspicious and I have to question lots of things. In 2016, let's say secretly, I wished for Donald Trump to win the elections because, I mean, it was Hillary Clinton, right? Hillary Clinton is responsible for destroying my country. But then I realized the system is rigged. And the system recreates itself. And the other day I said, if it's not Mike Pompeo or Nikki Haley, then there is someone else who is acting like Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley. The system grooms the politicians and teaches them that if you don't follow this path, then the hierarchy, you stay in the bottom of the hierarchy, right? So many people have aspirations, and many people that I know, they were very critical of the deep state in the US, the establishment keep criticizing. But when it came to Trump's this last victory, and I'm not coming to blame them, you know, but they were over optimistic about this. And Trump ran on a platform of no, like, make America great again, America first, and we no longer want to engage in, let's say, acts of hostilities or wars around the world. So how did this current Trump administration went from no war hawks, no neocons, to all war hawks all of a sudden that we've seen with these selections?
Well, I'll tell you what, talking about politics is you know how it is. You can't it's not like it was decades ago when I was heavy into politics as in my younger years. I grew up in a political family. My grandmother was always campaigning. My dad, he was elected. My grandmother's husband was a politician. Just campaign. I grew up with it. I was the president of my high school Republican club. Debated all the time. I loved politics. In the 1988 was the first campaign I was involved in. I was still a teenager, but I worked for the George H.W. Bush campaign for president. And talk about evolving your thought process. By 1992, I like, geez, I had already figured out at that point. I didn't know the word neocon, but I knew this George H.W. Bush guy is not what I thought. You know, look at what he's doing. And skip forward into the early 2000s, I was working to stop his son from getting elected. I was running the campaign in North Carolina and South Carolina for Steve Forbes, who was a billionaire. I mean, he wasn't a great guy overall, but he was very non-interventionist in his foreign policy. And I could see George W. Bush had surrounded himself on the campaign trail with all of these neocons, and it was just going to be a repeat of his dad's administration. But back then, you could talk about politics, and it was a boring subject. It wasn't like it is today, where everybody wants to throw in their 2 cents. Because back then, it wasn't about culture war. It wasn't all about your alt media influencers talking about owning the libs and all this. We debated boring stuff like, Bush's tax cut plan, and is this better or that better, and the nuances of policy. And now politics, you bring it up, and people's egos are so tied to Trump or Harris or Biden or whoever, that if you say anything, no matter how rational or fact-based it is, you are going to, it's like swatting a hornet's nest. People go nuts. They can't engage in real political debate anymore. So hopefully today in your show, I can swat the hornet's nest and get them all mad at you and make you pay for bringing up the topic of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Now, your question, which I have avoided up until this point, how did it go? I don't think it ever was anything but neocon. When you looked at the first administration, before Trump even took office, he was already getting into trouble with this foreign adventurism. You had General Mike Flynn, his national security guy he had chosen. He wasn't in the position yet. Chose Flynn, a Democrat, by the way, to be his national security advisor. And Mike Flynn, even before the Trump administration was inaugurated, Flynn was getting himself into trouble. What he was doing was he had gotten his marching orders. He had been told to Obama, as an outgoing snub toward Israel, had basically said, there's going to be this UN vote. Normally the USA and the Security Council, we stop all these anti-Israel resolutions from being passed by just vetoing it, using our veto power. Obama said, just abstain. Let the resolution pass. So what Mike Flynn did was he got in touch with the Russian ambassador, and he's saying, look, we are going to do this for you after Trump gets elected if you will veto this resolution in the Security Council on behalf of Israel, provide some cover for Israel. And then as soon as the administration did take office, Mike Flynn out there, the very first week, was out there prancing around like a peacock, big grin on his face, preening, bragging about how he was putting Iran on notice, and we were going to stick it to Iran. Over time, Trump brings in neocons like John Bolton, Elliot Abrams, all of these people who, even if he did not know, he ought to have known through just a little bit of investigation who these people were and what they represented. Now, skip forward to this campaign. This time around, I knew nothing was going to be any different, even though he was out there saying things are going to be different. He's a politician. Of course he's going to lie. But earlier this past week, when he said, guess what, guys? I am not bringing Mike Pompeo or Nikki Haley back. And everyone's, yay, that's so great. And it was great. It was a great announcement. But did that mean he was changing his tune? Of course not. It's just they were not sufficiently loyal to him. Pompeo, even though he had been a bootlicker the entire time he was in Trump's administration, first as CIA director, then as Secretary of State, Pompeo made this mistake of floating the idea that he was going to run against Trump for president. That was enough. You don't go against Trump. Nikki Haley, same thing. She was a total Trump loyalist, but she ran against him and said some mean things, and that's it. So that's why they're out, not because Trump's against their war hawkishness. What he has done is he has brought in people who are equally, or if not more so, loyal to Israel, loyal to the Zionist cause, and hell-bent on going to war with Iran. So I don't see that anything has changed other than just the particular players he's using, but they're all dastardly, horrible people. Nothing's really changed.
In my opinion, Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley, this discussion that we've seen on social media platforms, all of a sudden people are like, no to Pompeo, no to Haley, and pushed by big platforms affiliated with Musk. So I felt like there was let's say, a consistent or a planned campaign against them, and use them as sacrifice lambs, as if like we don't want no longer neocons in the Trump administration. But they sacrificed these two lambs and then brought so many other personalities. When I watched their videos, I was like it doesn't seem to me that they are for America. They are for Israel first, and
Very
then
much.
America comes next. I watched the video for the current Secretary of Defense, Pete Hexes. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correct. And he was a few years ago in Jerusalem in the King David Hotel, and he gave an apocalyptic speech there and promising or saying that it's possible to build the third temple in Jerusalem. After moving the embassy to Jerusalem and then recognizing Golan Heights, he said those were people used to say those were impossible, and it happened. So why not? We can also push further and build the temple. And then he was in Jerusalem. I'm just going to show this photo. Pete Hexes was in, I think this was in from 2017. So Pete Hexes, Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense, once toured the Al-Aqsa compound with Rabbi Chaim Reichman, a US-born Israeli rabbi who leads the Temple Institute, which is dedicated to destroying the Dome of the Rock, the Golden Dome behind them, and building a temple over its ruins to serve as the seat of a greater Israel genocidal theocracy. I've been reading some comments about this, and someone says that if you want to know what's going to happen next, search for Gog und Magog or George und Magog. What is this scenario, this apocalyptic scenario that they are promising and they're working? It seems like there is a work behind it, right? Like they're really actively trying to destroy the compound, the Al-Aqsa mosque, and then build something different. But if theoretically this happens, what is this apocalyptic scenario that they're speaking of?
What's ironic is that Christian Zionists, the plan that they have, or the way that they interpret end times events, is extremely anti-Semitic. And I think that a lot of the Jews who work with them know this, but hey, if you can manipulate the ignorant Christian community, so be it, if we have to put up with some of this. So here's the general idea. Yeah, Pete's he's crazy. There's pictures out there. If you see him he likes to take his shirt off. He's got these great big Freemasonic Knights Templar tattoos emblazoned on his chest. He's got this this kind of Christian crusader mentality about him. And so it doesn't surprise me that he would be, I hadn't seen that photo before. But here's the idea with in evangelicalism, in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, and there's stories also in Daniel and a few other books of the Bible that talk about the end times events that precede the return of Jesus as the Messiah coming to the earth to usher in a reign of 1,000 years of peace. And what is in the book of Revelation is the idea that all of these countries, all of these nations of the earth combine against Israel to destroy the Jewish people, who are God's people, and they fight them, and it's crazy and it's chaotic, and they get beaten down to where so many Jews have been massacred that you just have this remnant left. And if it were not for biblical promises made by God to come and save the Jews from utter annihilation, the world would in fact utterly annihilate the Jews from existence. But because of these promises, at the time that they are in their most dire need, that is when the Messiah comes down, and as his feet touch the Temple Mount, there's a great earthquake, it splits open, and he goes on to defeat in this big, the battle of Gog and Magog are basically two big armies that are fighting. This is all part of this end times Armageddon battle idea. Rather than see these things, and the Jews are saved, and then they get converted to Christianity. They worship Jesus as their Messiah, finally repent of their sins, and that's at the point that we go into this time of peace. Now that's the idea that Christian Zionists have, and so it's very similar to the, and I forget what it's called in Islam, with
I
the
just
Mahdi.
yeah,
Uh,
just the second coming of Mahdi.
yes, right. And so ISIS took this idea and they went crazy with it, which is you have to force the Messiah to return, to speed things along.
Hmm.
You create so much chaos. You go out and you kill the unbelievers, even fellow Muslims who don't believe your version of it. You know, the takfiri, Salafist insanity, just kill everyone. And because of all this bloodshed and everything, you kind of you create a situation where the Messiah returns, the
Hmm.
Mahdi returns. That's kind of what Christian Zionism is, with this end time stuff, except with a little bit more of a smile and less blood on your own hands. You just send other people to do the killing. Um, but that's the idea: is you want to have so much chaos, and so these people in power in Washington D.C. who have this mindset, people like Pete Hegseth
Hmm.
and others like Kristi Noem, who's the Homeland Security Secretary. She's a Christian Zionist. You've got Elise Stefanik and others. When you have this, Mike Pompeo was certainly a Christian Zionist. When you have this extreme interpretation that you can manipulate world events through the foreign policy decisions that you make toward Israel, going to war with Iran on behalf of Israel, when you do these things, you bring about conditions that will speed up the return of the Messiah. And
Hmm.
that's what they're after. Kind of like the Jewish extremists who say, well, yeah, we want the Messiah too. But the way we do it is we're going to blow up the Dome of the Rock, and rebuild the third temple on the Temple Mount there. It's trying to basically manipulate God by you making events happen here, and
Hum-
it's
yeah,
radical.
like there is human intervention. Like for example, I was reading that devastating war should hit Damascus as well, or Damascus would be destroyed before this second coming of Messiah.
Mhm.
Like it makes you wonder, all what happened in the past 14 years in Syria, was this also part of the plan to accelerate the second coming of Messiah from their perspective? Because who has engineered the war in Syria and who has funded and dumped all these weapons, like the US intelligence, Israeli intelligence, and the allies of the US in the region, right? Like I was really shocked to learn that Damascus would be present in this, let's say, the end of times preached by the Zionists.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. But it informs people's actions, or those that are of this belief system, and that's why it's so important to maintain separation of church and state to the extent that we can. While it's one thing to have private faith and to live your life according to your faith, it's another thing to get in and control government policy based on religious speculation of how
Mm,
things are supposed to go. My original channel name years ago when I started on YouTube back in 2012 was the End Times News Report, and
mm,
it was based on analyzing current foreign affairs and global conflicts and how they were connected to um, predicted end times events from the Bible and so forth. And um, I spent a lot of time looking at it, and the more I did, the more that I saw these things are not actually happening the way that the Bible spells it out, but there sure is a whole lot of effort by certain parties to make it look that way.
yes.
Zionists, from the late 1800s, they were predominantly and still are atheists. They're non-practicing Jews. They're non-believing Jews, just like the Marxists were. with the Bolshevik Revolution. These are people who don't believe in God. But Zionism found out early on that since a lot of Jewish people do have faith and are religious practitioners, well, if you can manipulate them according to their religious beliefs, you can control them. And that's where religion becomes potentially dangerous, is that
Yeah,
you can,
weaponized.
yeah, you can weaponize people. You can use people as weapons by using their religious beliefs and that's what Zionism has done to Christianity, at least a portion of Christianity. Of course, not all of it, but it's a growing part of Christianity that, to me, has been very alarming to watch this last decade or so. The growing extremism. I mean, people wearing their red MAGA hats in church, preachers giving sermons about Donald Trump. It's just insane. They've gone mad.
Yeah, since you mentioned the church and we're talking about the second coming of Messiah and Jesus, I also realized in the months preceded these last elections, there was a particular focus on the Christian community and trying to motivate them to vote for Donald Trump. For example, Russell Brand, who is not an American, he performed with Jordan Peterson. If you remember, this was a few weeks ago, and they both kneeled and started praying in front of thousands of followers. In a big stage, and 2 days ago, Russell Brand also posts something, says, I believe that people are about they start to realize that Jesus is real. Like, there is now lots of mentioning of Christianity and Jesus Christ in the discourse of this Trump saga in the US. So you feel like Trump was successful in his PR campaign. He received endorsement from some Muslim communities, which was something. And people who have a big following on social media platforms, mostly Christian, let's say, from Great Britain, United States, Canada, they have been controlling or trying to encourage their people to vote for Trump. Jewish people didn't vote. Majority didn't vote for Trump again in the US.
Yeah.
And there are many people who don't like for the US to send military packages to Ukraine and Israel. I think those were the ones who were mostly betrayed or feel betrayed now by Donald Trump. But why the naivety? This is the point that I want to... Is this really a naivety, or people just... because it was Kamala Harris and the options are either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, then, I prefer Donald Trump. It feels the alternative was so horrible. I mean, I'm not, if I was an American, I wouldn't have voted. But if I saw Kamala Harris speaking, I would assume she's a puppet and she's talking a script. And when you say Trump, he has a character. He's interacting with the people, and he's speaking the language or what the people want to hear from him, not the politically correct language, So Donald Trump was more successful, let's say, and he's going to be in the White House soon. And I feel my analysis is that this team is definitely going to focus on the Middle East. People say that he will freeze the conflict in Ukraine to focus on China. I don't think he is able to focus on China. China is a finished issue. The US cannot go to war against China. But against Iran, this is the serious question. Is the US capable of mobilizing people in the US to go to war? Because I don't see that the mood is for war.
No, the mood is not for war, but you can manipulate the American people quite easily. 9/11 taught us that. Where we abandoned common sense, we got rid of our critical thinking during the build-up to the 2003 war with Iraq. It was just stunning to me watching this. At first, after 9/11, I felt the same fury that America was attacked and that so many Americans were. It was very traumatizing to experience that. And I was okay with the idea of, all right, the Taliban is not turning bin Laden over. If we have credible evidence that he's there and they're refusing to turn him over, okay, I can see limited action in Afghanistan to go get him. Maybe. I was on the fence about that, but I'm like, okay, I see the rationale here. And then Ron Paul was like in support of it. I'm like, okay, well, that influences me a little bit because I generally trust him on foreign policy. But when it came to Iraq, there was no question. They didn't have anything to do with 9/11, and the American people knew it. And at first, people were honest about that. But then you beat the drums of war, the propaganda, the mushroom cloud over American cities, and he's got weapons of mass destruction. He's on the verge of a nuclear bomb. You've got Netanyahu in between his time as prime minister in the U.S. Congress saying, "Oh, you've got to get this guy, or he's going to kill us all. You would do the world a favor." And so you've got the Israel lobby pushing the politicians trying to strong arm the American people. You've got Fox News, which was emerging as a kind of a new big alternative to CNN, and they're beating the drums of war. And very quickly, the American people fell in behind the idea of war, even though nobody could explain why. It took Colin Powell going to the United Nations. I was kind of thinking, all right, if Scott Ritter was out there saying, absolutely not. Scott went to Iraq to talk to their parliament saying, look, I know you guys think that by letting America think that you have weapons of mass destruction, you think that's a deterrent. You're wrong. You need to make sure you come clean, let inspectors in, put it all on the table so that they have no justification, because your only hope now is getting the American people on your side. And but it wasn't enough. The American people can be manipulated into supporting atrocity. Just look at what we're putting up with when we just have a fringe element in the United States that's opposing what Israel's doing. And it's mostly these, kids on college campuses. They're a little bit on the liberal side, radical side. Where are the Christians in America? Why are we not out in the streets in large numbers protesting what's being done to the innocent people in Palestine and what's now being done in Lebanon? Where's the outrage? Where's the basic decency of loving your neighbor and treating others the way you want to be treated? And we just ignore it because it doesn't affect us. And so I really worry about this looming war with Iran, because I've seen it. I've seen how Americans are so easily swayed by a little bit of propaganda. And when you have someone with the amazing superhuman ability to use propaganda the way that Trump does, I mean, he is magical. It's almost like he's got, a superpower. To spread propaganda, to spread lies.
Am I too paranoid? Am I too paranoid that in this situation there might be another attempt against Donald Trump and then blame it on Iran? So they open the gates of hell,
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. The only thing that I can think of, and I won't even articulate it because of potential, YouTube policy violations or whatever, but there's really only one way to stop a major war with Iran from breaking out in the next 4 years, and that is if Netanyahu and or Donald Trump are taken out of the picture. I don't think that J.D. Vance is as extreme. I think the longer that he's in there, though, the more they're going to suck him up into the the machinery, and he's going to become one of them. But I don't think he is as much of a suck up as he is to Donald Trump. I think at his core, he's not an interventionist in the way that Donald Trump is willing to be. But the clock is ticking on that. But aside from the disappearance of Netanyahu and Trump, I think war is virtually guaranteed. How it plays out is really the question. Will it be a trickle? Will it be a tit for tat exchange back and forth with Iran gradually escalating it? Or will it be a shock and awe thing like we did with Iraq, where we just go in and pounce on them? And it really depends on things like what you're saying. Can they come up with a false flag, like an alleged assassination attempt? Something like that to justify it. We know that he harbors grudges like no politician ever. So if he were to actually believe, if I was the deep state, if I was the bad guy, what I would do is convince Trump that they are out to get him, because he's very easily to manipulate. I mean, we saw that in his first term. Netanyahu works him like a puppet on strings. And of course, you've got the Miriam Adelson and all the other Zionists that have so much influence over him. But if you can convince him, and it won't take a lot of convincing. When Donald Trump, unbeknownst to many of his supporters, has actually tried to run for president a number of times prior to his 2016 run. He was exploring it in 1988, doing a lot of campaigning, kind of preparatory, exploratory campaigning. He tried again in 2012 and also in the year 2000. But in his 1998 exploration, there's a New York Times article where he's talking about what America's foreign policy should be. And in 1988, Donald Trump said, quoted in the New York Times, Iran has got a lot of oil. We need to attack them and we need to take their oil. So it's not like this is a new idea for Trump. He has wanted war with Iran for decades. It's been 40 years he's been talking about it. And so now he has surrounded himself with sycophants who also are very, very devoted to Israel, very, very devoted to the idea of helping Israel to become a super state in the region, helping them with the Greater Israel Project to grab more land from the surrounding countries and eliminating any potential threats to Israel. When you look at the rhetoric of people like Pete Hegseth or Marco Rubio or any of these people Trump is bringing in, they always conflate American interests with Israel, with Israeli interests, and American safety with Israeli safety. If Israelis are not safe, Americans are not safe, and that's crazy. That's nuts.
But what does that tell you? Does it tell you that Israel is an ally of the US, or Israel is part of the US empire? Like, does the American deep state sees Israel as an advanced, let's say, colony in the Middle East, which they have to protect because this is theirs, this is their project, this is their baby?
The thing that the concept of the New World Order that Alex Jones used to talk about all the time, globalism, with its factions like the deep state, is really, it mirrors our general American politics. You have, in America, if you say, well, what do you people believe? You can't say one thing. We've got two major political parties. They're little minor parties, but basically you fall into one of two big camps. The deep state, or the New World Order, is the same way. You have billionaire elites, bankers, hedge fund managers, powerful CEOs, the military industrial complex. You have some who are very liberal in their thinking. You have some who are very you could say conservative in their thinking, and they tend to fund two different sides. So when you have, for example, the Democrats in power, the Democrats are brimming with neocons, just like, in fact, the Democrat
Yes.
Party is where the neocons came from originally. They were infested in the Democrat Party before flipping over to the Republicans. But their interests are places like Ukraine. They want to see Eastern Europe changed around. You want to use NATO to go in and influence the expansion of the American empire over there. Go in and push further and further to Russia's doorstep, flipping countries into NATO and putting up anti-nuke missile defense systems on Russia's border to take out their first strike capability and neutralize Russia as a nuclear superpower. That's the idea. Those are the Democrats. And so when you have a Democrat in office, you have this powerful, entrenched deep state bureaucracy, which is not Republican or Democrat, but a mix of it. You have certain elements of that deep state bureaucracy that gets activated. Aha, our guy is in power. And so we're going to go after Ukraine. We're going to fund Ukraine's war. We're going to do this, this, this. But then you vote and you have a shift where it's not that Donald Trump and the Republicans are anti-war. It's just that they're for different wars. They're for different things. And so you're going to see a shift. Like when we had George W. Bush in office, we had the pivot to the Middle East and then when Obama later on was in office, you move away from the wars in the Middle East. I mean, not completely. I mean, you know better than anybody. Syria, Libya, these conflicts continue.
True proxies, yeah.
Right, exactly. But back and forth. And so you have these competing elements. Donald Trump is now taking power. And so we're going to pivot back to the Middle East. You're going to see an increase in warfare there. And with that is going to come all of the troubles that we've seen in the past that we know attend an uptick in Middle East conflicts. What I do see a little bit different, and I don't know where it's going to go yet, but watching some of the rhetoric from, for example, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, that's been surprising. He's really gone along well with Trump in the past, but now he's talking like he's a bigger supporter of the Palestinians, and the shocking thing is he's starting to speak out in defense of Iran, and they've been basically at war with Iran for a while now through Yemen. And of course, they're big oil competitors in the region. But that's something that's different. If the Arab world, these Arab states will band together along with states like Turkey and take a stand, things could really ratchet up into a world war pretty quickly. But as long as it's kind of this unipolar power, the United States and our allies supporting Israel and nobody standing up to us, it's going to be horrible for the locals, for the people that live in these countries.
There is something that multiple things changed since the Iraq war for the US to come to such a all-out war in the region. I think this determination to pursue zero-sum game against the rivals and enemies of the US, China, Russia, Iran, for example, brought these countries closer together. And after the Ukraine war, China and Russia have become, the relationship has become unbreakable. Mm-hmm. And China knows that if they succeed in Ukraine, they're going to come after China. And the Russians know that the Chinese have an invested interest in supporting them, and they will have their back if tensions arrive to Taiwan. Now, in the Middle East, in Iran, I think, is the third leg of the Eurasian region. So the Chinese are the biggest importer of the Iranian oil. And the Russians are a few steps away from striking a defensive pact with Iran. I think if the US wants to go to war against Iran, they will not find, first of all, they will find resistance internationally from Russia and China. There will be vetoes for sure. Of course, the United States will not listen to that. They have to mobilize their allies in the region. But this time, So something has changed in the UAE and Saudi Arabia after 2018's drone attacks against Aramco and against Dubai through the Yemenis. So the Yemenis flew some Iranian drones, kamikaze drones, and hit the oil infrastructure in both countries. And the US didn't come to defend its allies. So they pushed them into this war in Yemen. But then when the shit hit the fan, the US didn't come in defense of its allies. So the Saudis and the Emiratis said, we're not going to continue this war. They froze the conflict, and then they strike the diplomatic and security deal with Iran through the mediation of China. And now the Saudis and the Emiratis are telling the Americans, we are not going to be part of any future conflict with Iran. We have our economic vision. We want to try. We want to feed our people. I mean, I think that's the least thing they could do in such a situation. And this is something that President Assad said multiple times, like, if these Arabic countries stay on the neutral, like, and not support the US or Israel in the region, that would be perfect, you know? So their neutrality is, in my opinion, is a downside for the US plan in the region. I suspect if something like this happens, Iran and China will not let Iran go. Iran is too important for the Eurasian economic integration, too important for the Silk and Road Initiative, too important for the oil supply lines to Eastern economies. So I think Trump will exert maximum pressure on Iran, sanctions and some covert operations, intelligence work, this and that. But he will not be able to go to war unless Netanyahu causes it. If Netanyahu causes it, then there is war.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think that there's no reason, there's no justification that Trump could give for a large-scale war against Iran. Sure, we could go pop off some cruise missiles, hit some targets in Iran, but that's not going to bring the Iranian government down. You know, there's not much of anything that we could do aside from full-scale war, and there's no reason for it that the American people would buy unless Israel does do something dramatic. And if we didn't learn anything from 1967, we learned that Israel is willing to do terrible, terrible things to try and get the U.S. into war on its behalf. And if attacking the USS Liberty and slaughtering over 100 soldiers to try and make it seem like Egypt did it, to get the USA to go nuke Egypt, it doesn't tell you that these people are maniacs, then nothing will.
Yeah, I keep saying they're creative. They're creative in criminal mindset in how to trigger wars in the region. You know?
They really get the blue ribbon for creativity. I mean, look at everything that they've done. The difference, I was thinking about this yesterday. I've got my own set of morals and principles and things that I try and live by. And in certain, I was thinking, when it comes to, for example, the mess in Palestine, playing by the rules, when the other side will never play by the rules and will cheat like crazy, you're never going to win. You're going to get beaten. Like, playing by the rule, and that's the problem I see with Israel, is that they are so dirty. They break the rules of war. They do things that civilized nations don't do.
Yes.
Wiping out the civilian population the way they have, killing the women and children in Gaza on such a grand scale. What other country in the world is insane enough to do that? It just doesn't happen. But we're letting them cheat. The world is letting them cheat at this geopolitical chess game, and all countries play it. It's the Game of Thrones, you know, nations against nations, as we vie for supremacy in certain regions, and we have trade wars, and we do all of these things. You have diplomatic spats at the United Nations and all of that, but we don't go and commit genocide to get what we want. We don't go and lop off the heads of the leaders of every organization we don't like. And when you've got these people with no scruples, no morals, no hesitation to do what no other nation will do, that is what makes Israel extremely dangerous. They're wimps when it comes to a toe-to-toe fight. I mean, there's a reason that Israel is not invading Lebanon with a full-scale invasion, because they'll get their asses handed to them by the Lebanese. And that's why you have to look at Israel and just conclude that they're not that strong, but they are dastardly. And as long as they are willing to do these kinds of evil things, that to get the United States in, that's why I see war with Iran still as a real possibility, not because even Donald Trump, with all of his talk in the past about wanting Iran's oil and all that, I think he would still be restrained enough himself. But if there are even, say, for example, third intifada type attacks in Jerusalem, blowing up some school buses, or not school buses, but the city buses, like we saw back in the second intifada, things like that. And you can blame it on Iran, say, well, Iran is providing Hamas or whoever, Islamic, Palestinian Jihad with these weapons. Well, maybe you can manipulate Trump into taking some actions that will gradually escalate. I was very glad to see back after he assassinated Soleimani and Iran retaliated. Fortunately, Iran was level-headed, and they gave the United States advance warning so that we could get our troops out of the way. But still, they showed we're going to strike back. And it caused over 100 concussions among U.S. soldiers. But Trump didn't retaliate. He didn't. He couldn't get the people. He may have wanted to. I don't know, but he couldn't do it because the military advisors around him said, first of all, this attack on Soleimani was stupid to begin with. But now this is going to be full-blown war. Are you crazy? And it was Netanyahu that manipulated him into doing it. But this time around, it's very different. Donald Trump learned from his first term that he doesn't always get what he wants when he has people under him in positions of authority, like Secretary of Defense, who opposes what he wants to do. And that's why you have the most unqualified Secretary of Defense nominee in U.S. history in Pete Hegseth. What does he have to do with anything? He's got no experience.
He has a big mouth. He has a big mouth. He has a big mouth.
But he's a yes man. And that's what Trump is doing, is he's filling all of these positions with yes men or yes women who are just going to be, yes, sir, you want us to go do this? Yes, sir, we'll do it. We'll do it. And that's the danger for this term, is that he's not going to have any adults in the room with him standing up to him this time. And that's what frightens me.
I've never seen a number 666, like 666 people watching this live streaming live. Guys, before we move to the last part of this conversation, there's only one thing left to discuss. I just want to tell everyone, it goes without saying that the X account of Jake is in the description below, and also his YouTube channel are all in the description below, both tagged, and also the links are there. I want to ask you one last thing about the Matt Gaetz. John Bolton says that calls Trump's nomination of Matt Gaetz the worst nomination for a cabinet position in American history. And then I watched a video of him, which raised some eyebrows, to be honest with you. I will show you this video and let's comment on it.
Protected. This makes no sense. This is like evil, right? Like everyone agrees on. It's like you got a 99%
on Epstein. Issue. Bill Barr is the one that needs to be called in to give sworn testimony on what happened there at Bureau of Prisons, because that is not that. There's just no way that the story you're getting is the real story there. No freaking way. And Bill Barr knows it.
I think most people believe that, right? Like it's like no way that that's.
I actually think it was
That's
I actually think that on Epstein, it was a foreign government that took him out. I don't think it was a domestic enterprise.
Really?
I do. I'm not going to say which one, but I don't think it was domestic inspired to take out him. I think that was a foreign operation, government sponsored.
So foreign operation took out Epstein inside of our prison.
Yes.
So they would have not been allowed to.
Oh, I think it was in concert with people in our government.
Wow.
But not at like some, low level guard getting bribed kind of way.
Yeah.
At a state to state level.
So wow. So that's probably a lot of partied interests in keeping that under wraps.
You better believe it. Weapon systems at play, global deals at play.
Interesting. You have evidence to back that up?
I just am positing it as a theory.
Wow. Okay.
And I learned yesterday by APAC Tracker site that he's not funded by APAC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm reading conflicting reports about him. Some people say he's accused of minor sex trafficking, or I don't know what's happening with him. But it was very interesting to see and to hear him saying Israel without saying Israel.
Yeah. That tells you something about the power of the Israel lobby, that that you can't even speak the name. It's like what's the bad guy in Harry Potter? You can't say his name. Voldemort.
Voldemort.
Yeah, Israel is like Voldemort. You can't speak his name, or Sauron. Yeah, Matt Gaetz. He's a mixed bag. I mean, certainly there's some good things about him, but this is also the guy who he's an elitist. His daddy was a state representative state congressman down there in Florida. You can find the mug shots of Gaetz. A few times he got DUIs, and down there you're supposed to spend some time in jail for what he did, but daddy pulled strings and got him out, so he didn't have to serve any time. And he's gotten away with one thing after another. But he's a very, very loyal foot soldier of Donald Trump, and that's why Trump's nominated him. As far as the story, yeah, was it Greenberg? I forget his partner in crime, a Jewish guy, that they were sharing a 17-year-old girl together, taking her to parties across state lines. I think the age of consent in Florida, it wouldn't have been a crime there, but by flying her around, and so this other guy, he went to prison for it, and he kind of spilled the beans on Gaetz and gave some receipts, some checks that Gaetz had paid him, which was supposed to be for covering this girl, which turns it into sex trafficking. And actually this week, the U.S. House was due to release its report on Gaetz, their latest investigation, their ethics committee investigation. And that's why you notice that all of the other people who are sitting members of either Congress or some other position, as soon as Donald Trump nominated them, they didn't immediately resign from their positions. Matt Gaetz did, because as soon as the announcement was made of nominating him for AG and he resigned, well, now the House can't release its report.
Yeah.
So he did this. He resigned, and they timed the announcement to save his rear end from whatever was going to be in this report. I personally, at this point, don't think he's going to be confirmed. It requires Senate confirmation, and all it's going to take is 4 Republicans to vote against his confirmation, and he's very, very disliked by a lot of Republican senators. So we'll see. I think it's a long shot.
Yeah, very interesting. Jake, Thank you so much, really, for dedicating your time and sharing your wisdom with the audience of Syriana Analysis. I wish that I was able to follow all the comments and show it to you, how much people are appreciating your participation and your insight.
great.
Very happy to have you back soon. This time, not like waiting another 1.5 years, because last time I hosted you, it was called Twitter, and now it's called X. So we have to do this more often. Thank you so much, Jake.
Absolutely.
Really.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's live streaming. I appreciate every single one of you. We will see each other tomorrow. It's going to be Friday, right? Yes, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you, upon your families. Salam.